Welcome, everyone, to the BT Gender Equality Network, where today we are focusing on women in leadership and politics. I'm Nick Matzi, I'm the Deputy Chair of the network, and I have the pleasure to welcome our guests today. And we're joined by three politicians who are going to be talking to us about their experiences and to tell us their thoughts on how society and large employers like BT can promote opportunities for more women to go into politics, senior leadership, and also to encourage more women to take up STEM careers. Obviously, there's two currently. That's because our third guest was asking a question this morning in Parliament. Probably the best excuse for being late, I know. I'm sure she'll be here shortly.
Wait, she was on, have I got news for you? They put a bag there instead of Nicky Morgan.
I'm definitely not doing that. Danger territory, right. So why politics and why should we care? Many here will know that 2018 marks the centenary of women in the UK and Ireland getting the vote. Now, you got the vote as long as you were over 30 and either a member or married to a member of the local government registrar, a property owner, or a graduate voting in university constituency. So I hope that makes sense. It would take until 1928 until women had the same voting rights as men, which at the time was 21. Although women could become MPs from 1918, it wouldn't be until 1997 that more than 10% of MPs were women, and until 2017 when it would pass the 30% mark. Now, I do have... I thought I had a slide. There we go. There we go. Brilliant, Nick. That leaves us currently behind such bastions of democracy such as Rwanda, Bolivia, and Cuba. I think I'm not going to judge those countries, and there might be reasons why. And women currently make up 36% of government positions. Participation in politics by people of different backgrounds and demographics is important to create a fairer society, and one that is represented by a broad range of ideas and perspectives. We should care about the gender balance in Parliament, along with the social background of people, education and ethnicity, because otherwise legislation and the debate about how our nation is governed is dominated by a limited spectrum of thought. You only have to see that from the number of people who went to Eton. The overall question we should be asking today is how do we broaden participation and ensure we are represented by a Parliament which is a reflection of modern Britain? That's not for me to answer, thank goodness. That's for our esteemed guests. And so, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Baroness Burt. Baroness Burt was the Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament for Solihull from 2005 to 2015. In October 2007, she was elected as the party's first female chair, and in April 2014, she was appointed the government's Ambassador for Women in Enterprise and was nominated for a life peerage in 2015. Baroness Burt, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Nick, will you wave at me when I've had 4 minutes? I've got enough here to talk to you all morning, so maybe not. Maybe I should be a little bit more restrained. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much indeed for having me here. My name's Laura Lee, and I'm a girl from Dudley, and I suffer from chronic underconfidence. And yeah, I know, you're laughing, but it's true. And every time that I speak, I'm just kind of, a little part of me is still waiting for the no talent police to come along and tap me on the shoulder and say, come on, your time's up, you know, the game's up, we've twigged what you're up to here, out of the door. So my background, I've had several of my own companies. My background was HR. And I first got interested in politics when my husband proposed to me before he told me he was going into politics. And I thought that was a pretty mean trick, quite honestly. And I thought, well, it's all rubbish, you know, politicians, they're just in it for themselves. And it took me a while to work out that actually you could do things in politics. And one of the things that you in this room might think about is local politics, because you can really achieve an awful lot for your local area by becoming a local councillor. And I found that the skills that I had developed in business came in really handy when it came to politics, building a team, using the diverse talents and interesting people that come along, who want to help, and being able to motivate them. Because unlike work, where everybody's actually paid, volunteers do it for love. And so you really do have to be able to engage them and motivate them, and engage people on the doorstep as well. And being a nosy person helps. If you stand on the doorstep, nothing is more fun to me than walking down somebody's drive, ringing the bell and seeing who comes and what they've got to say. So if you're a nosy person, that's a really good start. That basically is where I started off. Some of the challenges that female politicians will find is that they very often get caught up with the rough and tumble of politics. And on Dudley Council, where I served for 5 years, the Liberal Democrats were equally hated by Labour and the Conservatives. So we got the, we certainly got the any soft edges rubbed off quite quickly. But that is helpful, being able to cope with embarrassment and being able to stand and hold your corner. Every time I do a speaking engagement, or if I've done some telly or something like that, I'm always focusing on all the things I did wrong. And if I make one tiny mistake, I just want to rip my skin off with frustration. But you learn, a little bit of practice, and you do learn. It does build up your confidence, and it does make you much better able to cope with all kinds of difficulties in life when they come along. What can BT do was another question I've been asked to cover to support women to take on leadership roles. From the people that I've spoken to already this morning, it seems that you've already got quite an inclusive culture. And it's really good to see guys here today, because if we all talk to ourselves, then that's not going to include other people. And it's so important, and I'm sure BT get it, because if you've got people working for you who look like the people that you serve, and who are actually not there as tokens, but who are there right the way up the decision-making chain in an organisation, that means that your products are so much more appropriate, your decisions are so much better than if it's a load of white guys all talking to each other. It isn't that men hardly ever, decide that they're going to discriminate. They don't do that. But if there's no woman in the room, they just don't think about us. Similarly, with other kinds of diversity as well, people, not just people of ethnicity and people with disabilities, but people who are from different kinds of background, from working class backgrounds, and as you said, Nick, not all from Eton, not all from private school, but people who actually reflect the composition of the organisation. So, getting everyone involved is just absolutely the key to success in an organisation. Training is a really important area as well. I don't know whether you do unconscious bias training here. I'm guessing you do. Yes. I'm sure that you do. Sorry?
It's available to do.
It's available. Okay. Well, perhaps some of the people who don't think they need it are the people who need it the most. In actual fact, it's what I find in a lot of circumstances. So fostering that inclusive culture is really, really the key in my view. And I became the government spokesperson for Women in Enterprise for the work that I've done in procurement, particularly in encouraging organisations to procure from people who look like the people that they are seeking to serve. That's nowhere more important than in government, but in organisations like BT, what it means is, that if you've got women-owned, ethnic minority-owned, disability-owned businesses, then they understand, they're more reflective of the needs of the people that you at BT are seeking to serve. And I love that phrase by Mo Molam, when you've got a whole testosterone-fueled room of white guys, she's saying that her first comment in the film was, okay, so shall we all get our willies off the table now and just talk about, the real things? And I think in BT, it's okay. It's off. They're all off the table. And I think that's really, really key.
That was more of a time thing rather than just to clarify what that was.
So in conclusion then, what I would say to you is politics is everywhere. It's in BT, it's in local politics, it's in any organisation that you care to mention, social organisations, voluntary organisations, it's there in your family. You can't escape it. But what's really, really important is that you feel free, that you feel able to step forward, and that there's someone there to tell you just how good you are. Because I had to have a really stiff talking to by a friend of mine before I could in any way believe that I could be good enough to become a Member of Parliament. So if you know somebody who's good, don't hold back, tell them. And if you are somebody who's being told, you could do that, you're good, then believe it, because you don't, the vast majority, I think, of women in particular, just don't realise how good they are. So that inclusive culture is the one that will encourage people with that talent, because without that talent, BT will not survive. No organisation can survive. It will atrophy. So believe them. Believe you are good, because you are. You wouldn't be sitting here in this room today were you not. So thank you very much for listening to me, and enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you. Thank you. There are seats at the front for those people who are perched on staircases at the moment. Please do come and grab them. Yeah.
Promise not to pick on you.
So our second speaker, the one who's threatening you currently, Jess Phillips, was first elected as a Labour Member of Parliament for Birmingham Yardley in 2015 and re-elected, obviously, in 2017. She became chair of the Women's Parliamentary Labour Party in September 2016. Those of you who watch PMQs on Wednesday, obviously everyone does, you might have seen her asking some very contemporary questions related to a recent incident, which I'm sure we will discuss.
Hello, so my name's Jess and I am chronically overconfident. And neither is acceptable if you are a woman. You can't be unconfident and you can't be too confident. I don't know what the perfect amount of confidence is, like the Goldilocks of confidence, but I don't have it. And people who are like me are therefore feminazis, we're bitches, we're to be silenced, we're to be stopped, we're too big for our boots. Oh, she's always saying that, roll your eyes, etc., etc. So as a woman in any line of work, you are either too weak or too strong, and nothing is acceptable. So I think that basically we have to just crack on regardless of how we feel in our internal dialogues, and just keep on trying to keep going, because no matter what you do, I am here to tell you that it won't be acceptable at the moment. It is not acceptable for women to be in positions of power, even though the Prime Minister is a woman. It is still, she cannot be overtly a woman. She cannot talk about women. She cannot be, in fact, I think the woman that she is, because she has to always be seen not to be being too radical, but to playing to a crowd of people. That means that she, you know, she's not one way or another. It is still in politics not acceptable to be shamelessly a woman, and that is a real shame. And I think that what Laurelie has said about people needing to be pushed forward and organisations needing to be inclusive is all absolutely right, but I'm going to come at it from the point of view that you need a massive stick, not a carrot, because we are choking on carrots. And I'm sick of eating carrots, because encouraging people to do things and hoping is the triumph of hope over experience. So only the Labour Party, actually I think the SNP are thinking of doing it, and I think the Liberals are having a crack at it now, but historically only the Labour Party have said that the way to get women into politics is to force it to happen, is to put a quota in place and say only women can stand in these seats. Unsurprisingly, the Labour Party is made up of 44% of the Parliamentary Labour Party are women. 119 Labour women currently sit in Parliament, and that's more than all the other parties put together by quite some margin. And I sit in all these meetings and people say, oh, we're just hopeful that more people will come forward. Oh, you know, we're really trying to encourage them. Well, it's not working. Because the reasons people don't come forward, and the reasons people from where I live don't come forward, is because they're not exposed to it. They're not exposed to the idea that they could or should. I am chronically overconfident and have wanted to be the Prime Minister since I was 4 years old, and that is even not acceptable for me to say it. You won't find a woman in Parliament who will categorically say, I would like to be the Home Secretary, I would like to be the Prime Minister, because we're not allowed to be ambitious, and we shouldn't say those sorts of things, and we're meant to hide it under the bush. Well, I would like to be the fucking Prime Minister. I didn't get involved in politics to support the coattails of somebody else. I got involved in politics because I thought I had something to offer that would change the world. Unfortunately, if you actually want to change the world, you're a bit radical to ever become the Prime Minister, so don't be banking on it. Don't go the bookies or anything. You'll definitely lose all your money. The trouble is that at the moment, everybody wants to talk about gender equality at the moment. It is a fashionable thing to talk about in companies across the land, and they're all about to be shamed in their gender pay audits. But actually standing up and saying Me Too or Time's Up and wearing your lapel pins and thinking that you're doing the right thing is useless unless you actually do something. It is about action. If the suffragettes taught us anything, it is that deeds matter, not words. So all of my colleagues who are appalled by men going to a ladies' zoo and bidding on, spicing up their wives, all of my colleagues, I want them not just to be appalled by it, but to be appalled by it when they see their colleagues doing it in the House of Commons, and to turn around and say, don't do that, don't feel her arse, don't talk to her like that, don't talk down to your staff, unless we start doing it and acting it out in our life. Now, I'm sure BT is a brilliant and inclusive place, but I bet you there are people who discriminate against each other here. Am I right? Yes, I am. There will be, and we have got to stand up against it and not be frightened to speak up, or frightened that we will end up in a tribunal court if we do, because the fact of the matter is, knowing that it's happening is all well and good, but unless we actually do something about it, have quotas, have targets, make schemes exist that people have to go on. So having unconscious bias training is absolutely fucking useless unless everybody goes on it. It's like, oh, we've done this nice thing, we've ticked this box. Ticking a box, I'm not interested in ticking a box. I want to see something change when there isn't going to be ladies' zoos anymore. That is not going to happen unless more women get involved in politics. We're not going to be able to be fearlessly who we are in all of our workplaces unless at every echelon of society it is visible that it's okay to be a woman who says things aren't okay. anymore. That isn't going to happen unless more people like me say it in places like the House of Commons and do something about it. So I'm not just going to stand up and say that I don't like what happened at the President's Club. I've written to the EHRC this morning, I've spoken to the Metropolitan Police, and I'm going to make sure somebody ends up behind bars. I'm going to change the law so that that practice will never be allowed to happen again, because just saying I give a toss isn't enough. And it isn't enough in business, it isn't enough anywhere. We actually have to do something differently. And if that is to say that everybody who works at BT, who is in the top tier of jobs, 50% of those people have to be women. And people say, well, it's going to take really, really long. I don't give a toss for your excuses. It has to happen. Because if it isn't happening, you have a problem. If it isn't happening naturally, there's a reason it isn't happening naturally. And the Labour Party recognised that it was never going to happen naturally with women in politics, and so they made a rule, and guess what? It worked. And by the next election, absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, more women MPs will sit on the Labour benches than men. Now, the Labour Party has a problem, don't get me wrong. They have some terrible problems, and the ability for women to rise to the top, because women in the Labour Party are like me, and we are quite radical. And it is much harder for radical women to rise to the top than those who are willing to behave placid in a man's world. I am not willing to behave in that way, and therefore, that's why you shouldn't put any money on me ever becoming the leader of anything. Because I am a radical. But that is what it takes. It doesn't just take hope and nice meetings. It takes doing something about it, forcing a culture. You all work here, the whole union movement is entirely based on the fact that the people who work somewhere demanded something. We have to demand something better. And FYI, men, it means you sometimes stepping back. It isn't just about hoping that women will... This is the Labour Party's problem. Of course we should have a woman leader. It's absolutely time for a woman leader. Oh, you meant me? You meant I had to not stand? Yes, I meant you. I meant you don't get a go, because you've had all the goes since the beginning of time. It's like a slide with children on it. If your kid just kept pushing their way to the front, you'd be like, oh God, I'm so embarrassed. Don't keep pushing yourself to the front. Recognise your privilege and move aside so somebody else can have a go on the slide. Because that is the problem, is we have to actually do something. So, of course, you should all think about being in politics, because I'll leave you with this one last thing, and because Nicky's here, I won't use the person who I usually use as my touchstone against... there are some really crap people in the House of Commons, and there's one particular man, I won't name him, but it's Chris Grayling. He has risen to the top, and he is the dullest man. And I just think how he looked in the mirror and thought, I can get to the top. How that happened. So just be more Chris Grayling is what I would say. You can definitely do it. There's a lot of crap people in there.
So, as the male head of the Gender Equality Network, I don't feel awkward at all currently for taking someone else's position. I didn't take it. The other person left, just to clarify, and we are looking for a new head, so please apply. Nicky has arrived, I'm very pleased to say, and I'm no longer the token Tory on stage. Yes. Well, I'm telling you now. Our third and final speaker is Nicky Morgan, who has been the Member of Parliament for Loughborough since 2010 and was the Secretary of State for Education and Minister for Women and Equalities from July 2014 to July 2016. In July 2017, Nicky was elected Chair of the Treasury Select Committee following the 2017 general election. Nicky, very pleased to have you.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say, having come in midway through Jess's speech, I really wish I hadn't turned up, actually, because how the hell does anybody follow that? You know, you've got two other brilliant speakers this morning, so I really feel what I'm going to say is completely inadequate. I agree with everything that Jess has just said, particularly the point about doing. You know, I've been lucky enough to hold all these positions at the moment as chair of the Treasury Select Committee. I'm the first female chair of that particular committee, and one of the things we're doing is holding an inquiry on women in finance, which supports the charter the Treasury launched just over a year ago. One of the things we're also asking anybody, so should anybody from BT come to give evidence to the committee, they can expect to have a question on what is your gender pay gap. And that should be a statistic that trips off the tongue of every senior executive in a company, let alone obviously is of interest hopefully to people in this room. And I hope that actually, you know, these are gender pay gap regulations that have been passed by this government, supported I think on an absolute cross-party basis. We of course want to go further, but we've got to get the rules up and running. But I hope it's the kind of information that actually will be instrumental and influential in determining where people apply for jobs in the future. Because not just enough to say, this is a great company, it's going to give me opportunities to travel abroad. Actually, what are the values of a company? What's the culture? How do they look after and promote and support people like me? So I wanted just to tell you a story, really, because you know, I'm 45. I thought I'd kind of hopefully seen it all, and certainly in politics, I think you know you do see it all. If you want to come and see it all, sit in on an MP's surgery. That's when you really do see all of life. I thought I was pretty good at sort of dealing with most situations. So we're at the moment doing an inquiry into small business funding. And there's a particular issue that came up in the House last week in a big debate around one big bank and their lending practices. So a councillor had asked to see me, elected councillor, and so I met him with one of the members of the committee, male member of the committee staff last week. And we sat down, and he said to me, we started the conversation about his work on this bank and this inquiry and everything else, and his advice to clients that he's given that have been caught up in it. And then he said, we started probing the numbers, and I said, well, can you just explain to me, you know, sort of the workings and how you've got to this, and the evidence and the rest of it? He goes, well, he said, okay, it's quite complicated. He said, but Oliver, who'd set up this meeting, who's one of our MPs, he tells me you're quite bright. Now, just think about the situation. Yeah, I didn't flatten him. I did need backup probably at that stage, but anyway. So yeah. So I thought to myself, at the moment, you know, those thoughts, and it'd be interesting to, you know, what would you have done in that situation? And of course, I think for the men in the room, you just wouldn't have had that comment. Yeah. That's what this is all about. So anyway, so I thought, well, if I'd been 25 and starting out my legal career, which is lovely to come back to the city part of the city of London, because I worked for 16 years around this part, I probably would just have ignored it. 10 years ago, I probably have kind of laughed it off. But actually what I turned to him, I said, gosh, that's patronising, isn't it? And he was really flustered. Good. And the clerk next to me, who I think has got young children, literally did not know where to put himself. He was so embarrassed. Anyway, I was recounting the story later on to members of the committee, cross-party members, and they were all absolutely horrified. So I said, well, that's very patronising. He said, well, I thought you just knew about education. I said, so you haven't even bothered to investigate my CV. And interestingly, in the Evening Standard last week, some so-called politically connected city grandee said, what does Morgan know about the city? Ignoring the fact that, yeah, I probably don't know as much as somebody who's been working for 40 years in the city. But I am a qualified solicitor, having worked in corporate M&A and interpreted the listing rules, the takeover code, the prospectus directive, the market abuse directive, the takeover directive, and all those other things for 16 years. So yeah, I think I know a little bit about the city, actually. So the point is, I may not be able to give as impassioned a call to arms as you've heard, but the point is, I think, as I said to another audience, the Financial News Women in Finance Awards recently, you know, I've kind of heard all the excuses. We take evidence. Why isn't the shortlist for this appointment? Why aren't there more women on this shortlist? Why aren't there more women than there are men? Oh, we couldn't find enough good candidates. Oh, there aren't people with the right skills. They haven't got the right experience. You know what? I'm kind of done with all of this. I really am. Do you know what? If you're looking for people to fill a position, be more imaginative. Talk to people. Take a risk. Put people on the shortlist. And actually the people that are going to drive change are people particularly, I don't know all the different positions that you hold here, but particularly it is middle management. You can have all the chief executives and all the chairmen of the boards, and it's important that they do sign up to the diversity agenda. It's important that they show leadership, they sign the Women in Finance Charter, they sign up to the 30% Club, and they do all the rest of it. But if the guys in the middle are not empowered, guys and girls, are not empowered to take a risk when they're hiring and promoting and putting teams together and putting people on jobs, then we are going to get nowhere. And those of you who are young enough to have perhaps just entered, started your careers here and in the city and the London and everywhere else, will be looking in 5 or 10 years' time and thinking, why am I still here? Do you know what? I'm going to go and move to somewhere else that's going to appreciate my talents more and that's going to make life easier and more enjoyable for me. So Jess is absolutely right. It's about doing. It's about catching yourself all the time, not making assumptions on behalf of somebody else. I won't put them forward for that job or that role because they've just had a baby and I think they're finding it difficult to combine hours. I won't put them forward for that thing because I know they've got care and responsibilities at home. Well, ask the person. You may well find somebody says, actually, you know what, I'd love to do this, but the timing's just not right. Or they might say, you know what, I could do this if I could work from home 2 days a week, or I could negotiate it so that I can come in early and leave early so my other half is also able to take over some of these responsibilities. We were asked to address 4 questions, so let me just very quickly do those. How can we encourage more women to join? Politics and politicians have to show we can make a difference. And I think that is part of the frustration, part of the reason that politics is in such a sorry state at the moment, is that everything's got so big. Big companies, big banks, big politics, big Whitehall and everything else. Making a difference, it's really hard to prove that you can do it. But I think we'd agree there are some colleagues who do make a difference. You know, it was Paula Sheriff who put down the amendment on the tampon tax to a finance bill, which changed the narrative. There are all sorts of female members of Parliament. Carolyn Harris, who is leading the way on getting support for children's funerals based on her own tragic experience. Caroline Spellman, who has got mothers' names finally put on birth certificates. I mean, it's 2018. What on earth are we only interested in the fathers for god's sake? So you can make a difference, but they're small and they're incremental steps. And I think actually women want to make a difference. I really think actually, I think younger employees, millennials as well, I do think, you know, actually if you're going to do something, if you're going to work hard, if you're going to make the sacrifices that being an MP or a councillor or others entails, and actually you want to know that you're doing it for a reason. What are the challenges faced by female politicians in the age of social media? Well, I think actually it's pretty obvious. It's out there. It's all politicians. But I think my colleague Johnny Mercer has written a very good piece this week about the abuse suffered by Ruth Smeeth, who he's great friends with on a sort of cross-party basis. I think they did something together and she got appalling anti-Semitic abuse. And I think sometimes it's not until actually, particularly for the guys, or particularly perhaps for older women looking back, it's not until you see how other people are treated. And I think for men in particular, it's often when they have daughters or they have younger women in their lives and their families, or perhaps they're mentoring somebody, they really begin to see actually what it's like. You know, the way I deal, I often get asked, how do you deal with this stuff? The point is, I think in all of us in life, we have people whose opinion we really, really trust. You listen to those people and you ignore all the other rubbish that is out there. What can encourage companies do like BT to support women take on leadership roles? Well, you can train them. You must have the most fantastic training and mentoring programs. And I have to say, in politics, there is absolutely zero training. My appointment as Secretary of State for Education came as a total bolt out of the blue. I had a very weird call the day before from somebody in number 10 and thought, well, that's a bit odd. And then the night before, I heard somebody saying, one of the journalists saying, a woman born in 1972 is going to be promoted to the cabinet tomorrow. And that's the age, that's the year when Ken Clarke first almost entered politics. And I thought, well, that's odd, that's me. I was trying to work out who else it could be. That's my birth year. But when you get the call, you walk up to number 10, you get called in, you sit in front of the Prime Minister, and there's a kind of X Factor moment when he says, I'd like you to do... What do you want me to do? Of course, I hadn't appreciated until the most recent reshuffle that the answer you could give is no. That was a revelation. The good thing, actually, in a way, is I didn't have to apply for it. I didn't have to put myself out there for it. I had, in David Cameron, a male boss who, for whatever reason, I don't actually care why I was appointed, I think to calm the situation down, but I was there to do my bit, and I just said yes. You weren't given time to think about it. I think that's very important. Just finally, how can society encourage women to take on roles which are underrepresented, specifically technology or engineering roles? Look, role models are really important. Never underestimate the power of all of you to be role models, to go back to your schools, to go into your children's schools, to go and speak to different groups, to put stuff on social media, to really challenge. It's the year of engineering this year, and there's some really great stuff out there, but we've got to keep absolutely pushing it. We also have to change parents' perceptions. I don't think anybody ever mentioned the word engineering to me as a career. Professional qualifications, going to university, doing other things was all mentioned. But engineering never was. It's only because I represent a big university in the Midlands with a big engineering. In fact, they take more female engineers than any other university, that actually I know as much as I do, and that's not very much about engineering, to the point where I have said to my son, actually, I think it would be something that you'd be really interested in. Why don't you think about it? And I'd say exactly the same to any of the other young audiences that I might come across. But actually changing the perceptions and going in and just don't underestimate the power of talking about yourselves, your careers, what you do here, what you've done before in your careers. That is incredibly powerful for people to hear all of your stories, however young or old, however experienced or inexperienced you might be. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning, and I hope you take from this, it's time to do. Thank you.
I can't believe that. That's great.
Okay, so before we do questions, hashtag BT Women in Leadership. I think only Nicholas Soames writes longer hashtags. I don't know why, but you must follow them. They're great. Let's get straight into questions. So, question number one.
Hi. Sorry, Georgia.
Oh, please stand up, introduce yourself so we know who you are.
I'm here, sorry. Hi. My name's Sarah. I work in BT Group Brand and Marketing, help out with the Gen a lot. Today you guys all spoke about doing and how important it is. And Jess, you also mentioned the gender pay gap reveal that is coming about in April. But aren't I right in thinking the penalty for that is only like 5k? Is it not even that? So if you're talking about doing and you're trying to get big companies like BT or big banks to reveal stats they're not going to want to reveal, how do you get a bigger stick? I think is the question.
Yeah, you go for it.
Because, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. I mean, you're right, it could be a bigger fine. But really, for a big company, does fines matter? What matters is public reputation. And actually, one of the big things is about public reputation, shareholders, people not applying for the jobs here because they look at the company and they say, this is not a company that is doing anything to tackle gender pay gap. So the more important thing, the figure of obviously the pay gap number is important, but more important is the reporting and the planning that goes on alongside it. And I can tell you, if anyone's here, senior executive, but my impression, my understanding is that they have to report this stuff if they are a company of over 250 employees. And the conversations it's prompting at boardroom level are absolutely fascinating. You know, somebody has to sit there and say, we have to put this out in the public domain, we have to show our competitors and our shareholders what this number is, and we have to explain it, and we have to show what we're doing about it. Now, your point is right about doing. The question is going to be, what pressure then externally and internally can people here and outside apply in terms of saying, okay, you've got a problem, so what are you doing about it? And next year, is the problem going to be less? And people like me, on committees like mine, can also absolutely be asking the question. So I just wonder with big businesses, I'm not sure that fines really count. You can pay a fine for antitrust or for money laundering or whatever it might be, but that reputational risk is what they all spend an awful lot of money trying to preserve.
Baroness Burt, so Laurie. I'm ex-army, I'm very formal. Sorry, you spent time as the ambassador for Women in Enterprise, so this is probably something you're familiar with.
It is, and I was just going to pick up on the point that Nicky made. Shame. Shame is a really big key. But I was talking to an inclusion specialist from one of the major construction companies in this country on Monday. And
The ones that are left.
they are, yeah, but they have, as a result of looking at this legislation and the knowledge that they have got to publish, they are completely redesigning their whole way that they promote, pay, etc. Because they realise it's not good enough. And it's taken this bit of legislation, which we did, we pushed for when we worked together in coalition. It's a hugely powerful tool. And I agree, it don't matter what the fine is, but, the shame factor, it's great. Yeah.
Jess?
I mean, I also am going to encourage the EHRC, which I don't think uses its regulatory powers at all in the way that it should. So the Equalities and Human Rights Commission, that where there are big problems, and all it will take is one case of one, so it will be what they call a strategic case just look at this organisation that has been in the media for the last 2 days. I think that still people probably think they can get away with it. I think that the pressure is mounting because of so many voices saying the same thing. So the Me Too movement is a really good example of, we as women all feel like, yeah, finally, everyone realises it's been crap for us for all this time. But then that event still happened last Thursday, the President's Club. So for the people who were the doing, it still didn't feel like they'd felt it. But they felt it now. And they're probably a bit shamed now. So I think it will be the same for business. There will be some really horrendous examples, and they will be shamed. But the trouble with it is it all coming out on one day. So it is just trying to filter through the data and make sure that it isn't just. Or the alternative is the trickle where everyone goes, EasyJet have got crap pay, and so-and-so have got crap pay, and so-and-so have got. And then everybody just gets blind because it's just like another place that pays people badly. So we have got to do a piece of work in marketing, actually, whether that's through committee work that we do, through writing a piece. I thought I might just do like a shame of the week. Don't buy these products this week. I tell you what, I'm never buying a Cardo again. He was at that dinner. I've got an organ on as well. I don't need to cancel it. It's going to come on Saturday.
So just to
Yeah, that's it.
Just to be clear, that BT will be publicising and whatever the word is, we'll have our gender pay gap report out at the end of March, I believe, or early April. Let's go to the WebEx, because we've got some of the hubs out there. So I don't know who's driving. Yep, we've got the Mr. Ons will tell me the question.
Hi there. A question from Maria. The question is, 80% of the delegates at Davos last year were male. This year, Davos has all female co-chairs, but the gender of delegates hasn't changed. What can BT do to alter the diversity of delegates at Davos, and does Davos matter?
So that's someone watching WebEx remotely.
A voice.
Voice of God. Yeah, it's like being on blind date. Graham.
So I don't know if either of you have ever been to Davos or experience of it, but I think it's a really interesting question, probably about broader business and the representatives that we send to these sort of organisations. So what can I think it's an exec question, really. What can we do to get more women execs and get them out to these international organisations?
Well, I suppose the question is, I don't know, I've never been to Davos, but what level, and actually someone's got to think about it. And actually challenge, just because you're told to send a certain level of people, do you have to? Do they say no if you don't? Do you actually say, well, actually, we're going to send some younger women, because actually that's going to shake them all up a bit over there? Does it matter? I'm not entirely sure that it really does. I mean, it's like our party conferences. They're kind of things to be endured, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody was saying critically that Theresa May spent more time with her team having fondue last year than meeting all sorts of other people. I think I'm with her on that one, I have to say. I think it's media organisations very excited. You can see the BBC, as usual, has sent probably 1 million people to go and cover all of this. And I think that most people are thinking, all these people have kind of just decanted themselves to somewhere in Switzerland. Couldn't they have done it somewhere else? But for BT and for big companies, if you're going to send delegates to anything, then I think it's about having it's that thought process, isn't it, all the time. It's so easy just to say, well, we'll pick that person, because they're that level. And it's about challenging ourselves and saying, well, actually, are they the right people? Are they the right people to deliver the message? It's like if you're giving a speech. You know, you think, what's the audience? What do they want to hear? You're going to Davos. What do you want people to take away from seeing the BT delegates?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think Davos matters. I don't even know what they do there. It makes literally no effect on my life whatsoever, or on Parliament. I don't think it ever really. It's just who gets to go. Really, is all that gets the conversation. I don't think that it makes very much difference to me, to my life. I don't work in a big corporate organisation or a big NGO. But what I would say is that I do think that it would make a big difference if one year when they went to the hall in Davos and it looked much more like the world. I actually think that would send a really, really strong message, and Nicky's exactly right. You've got to think about it. You've got to say, okay. I mean, in the talking of party conference, I think you're right. It is something to be endured. But in the Labour Party, the rule is for anyone who goes, if for 1 year your organisation sends a man, the next year they have to send a woman. So it's always 50-50, the audience, at least. So we have a rule about it. We have rules for everything.
Laurie?
Yeah, I think that's a good rule, though. You know, and
Doesn't make it any more fun,
No.
I don't think.
no, well, it might well, actually.
Yeah.
It might do. Might actually.
Marginally, I don't know. I've never been to a Tory.
You know, I mean, if you
conference
have a,
before.
if you've got a diverse group of people, you're going to get a very different kind of conversation going on. So I think it really, really is important, and I think the way that things look are very important. I mean, you talk about role models. If everybody at the top table looks white and male, what message does that send to the rest of us? You know, we must have inclusion. We must have difference of thoughts, difference of opinions. Not everybody coming from the same, you know, the same class, the same school, the same club.
Same place. Everybody comes from London. I'm so sick of everything being
Apart from the
through
two brummies you've got
yeah.
sat here.
Midlands MP as well, but the lens of London, honestly, on Newsnight, when they talk about the Garden Bridge, I think buy a fucking hanging basket. Nobody else in the country gives a toss.
Thank you for whoever across the UK is not in London for that question. Yes, please. Yes. Let's get a microphone. Sorry, I'll come to you second. I need a microphone. Sorry, I didn't know you had it already. You do that. You do your question first, and I'll come to you second. Okay.
Going back to the gender pay gap, I think it's in Massachusetts. They've introduced some legislation where you're not allowed anymore to, when you're recruiting, to know the salary of the person, their previous salary, as well as the reporting, and actually saying to companies, you don't get fined if you can demonstrate you've got a program to fix your pay gap. Do you have views on that and whether that would work here?
I've spoken to the people in Massachusetts who did it, so I spoke to the politicians who pushed it through, a woman from Boston, and I think it sounds really interesting. It's too early to say. It was done in another state in America, I think, as well, before this. I can't remember which one. Illinois, maybe. I think it's too early to say about whether it will make it, because the gender pay gap isn't like equal pay. It's quite hard to see it from far out whether things are making a difference, such as parental leave, childcare, those sorts of things. Those levers, it's hard to see for at least 5 years, I think, to see whether they worked. But I think that it would. I think the trouble is that for women who are not very confident, having to write down how much you currently earn on any application makes you feel like you're punching above your weight if you're going for a job. And I know that feeling exists. And so if that was eliminated, it's sort of like bad pay follows you for ages. And you're sort of dragging it like a weight. And so eliminating that. Now, that is perversely completely the opposite of actually most of the thinking, which is that pay transparency is the way forward in these things. But on that particular issue, I think it could really work. And it's certainly something I think that we're looking at how it's working over in America. And we did, on the Women in Equality Select Committee, we did a big report into the gender pay gap that we will certainly come back round to after about a year in from the reporting to see what's what, and that will almost certainly be one of the things that comes up.
Already?
I think I got it the wrong way round. I thought you were saying that you're not allowed to know the pay of the person who's your predecessor, your potential... All right. No, she got it wrong way round. I agree with her. Shut up.
First time in history, Lib Dems and Labour.
Especially because we are from the neighbouring seats.
Yeah.
I fought against the Lib Dems.
Nikki?
I think it's a very interesting idea. I think Jess is right. Having the gender pay gap regulations has breached a sort of a taboo, if you like, that people don't talk enough about pay. And I think just generally there's the issue of looking at sort of need or identity blind job applications. So things like taking names off, taking gender off, taking salaries off, and obviously there's got to be enough information there that you've got to know whether somebody, what they've done. But I think it is right. It does, people do. Unfortunately, we all make, and I think as you came in and you said, we all make assumptions. You see something. My big assumption is when people apply for a job in my office and they write, "Dear Mr. Nicky Morgan." I'm afraid that is one where actually they just don't get through.
Just to check, because we were supposed to stop at 11:30 for refreshments. As long as you're happy to keep going, great. After you.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Fiona Redding and I work in EE Home Broadband Marketing. I was reading with interest about the Prime Minister in New Zealand and how she's pregnant, good for her, and also that she's only taking 6 weeks off after she's had her baby. And I guess I was wondering about the kind of tension there between personal ambition and professional ambition, and I was wondering what your experiences of that were.
I actually heard her on the radio, and my understanding was that it was a bit of a role reversal going on there, which I thought, great, got that in my household as well. I do all the work, my husband sits at home, very nice. But someone who was interviewing her said, okay, well, who's going to bring up the baby? And she said, the people of New Zealand will bring up the baby. And I thought, how lovely, and I just tweeted how refreshing, the thought that we all are a big community. And we lose sight of that, unless you're living in some kind of a tiny village these days, we lose sight of our collective responsibility for our children and indeed for each other. As far as I'm concerned, she's absolutely first rate in my book, and I just wish her well, and I wish that attitude, that approach could be more prevalent in all areas of society, really.
David Cameron, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown all had babies while they were Prime Minister. Every single one of them. We're not asking the same question about them, are we? So it is totally and utterly acceptable that she might have a baby. I went back to work when my baby was 3 weeks old, and I used to express on the train. Not just down the chair, just into the drain. I didn't keep it. Didn't like, because but I only went back, sort of 1-2 days a week, but because I wanted to, and I don't think women should have to apologise for wanting to go back to work after they have their children, or for not wanting to. For me, feminism isn't about women going to work. It isn't about women staying off work. It is about you being able to make the same choice that a man would be able to make in those circumstances. And if you want to go back to work, and I suppose the role reversal is the natural role reversal, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be the exception that a man is off work to look after their children. It's like when people ask me if my husband is babysitting, I want to kill them. Because he is their father. He's not like a 13-year-old girl I've paid £10 to come and look after the kids. He is their father. He is their primary carer. It is ridiculous. But if we could swivel that would be massive change. It isn't just about getting women into the boardroom. It is about getting men into the nursery. It has to be a complete change. Those things have to happen. That has to change. I think that's the silver bullet, actually. That is the silver bullet. Because if men did the jobs that women don't get paid enough for in the sectoral analysis that shows that women just get paid, their jobs are just worse paid, if men did them, they wouldn't be as badly paid. Because the men wouldn't stand for it, wouldn't stand to work 40-hour shifts of care work, you know, running around from one place to the next, being paid £8 an hour. They wouldn't stand for it. So that is what needs to change.
Nicky, any thoughts?
Look, I agree with that. I was always very careful when I was a minister, we talk about childcare, to say, you know, childcare is a parent's issue. I think that was slightly more wishful thinking than actual reality, sadly, but I think Jess is absolutely right. We've got to change the dial on that. I always remember talking to an audience like this, and one lady said to me that she and her husband were both working, and there was one time when, you know, it happens, you know, your child is sick, and who's going to you know, take time off or go home or whatever. And her husband said, he said, I just cannot ask my boss. He said, I can't do it. I will be absolutely marked down. And that is that's a kind of attitude that senior management can stamp on and say, actually, you know, if somebody asks for time off, either sex, whatever reason, actually, they're all absolutely considered. You asked about personal things, so I don't know, I mean, how people do it. My son and my husband live in Leicestershire. I'm down here 3 nights of the week, you know, which just seem to be 3 nights when I either, you know, speak to audiences or do work or sit in front of the emails. I'm not partying in London, although my husband, I think, sometimes thinks that I am.
Yeah, mine does.
But the honest truth is, and I would say, you know, you can't have it all, in the sense there'll have to be compromises. I think that what the New Zealand Prime Minister is doing is brilliant, and I completely take Jess' point about going back to... I wanted to go back to work after 3 months. I was absolutely ready to go back. Not full-time, but I wanted to go and do something. In fact, I was campaigning probably within about a fortnight, again, in my seat. But there are compromises. I mean, the point is, I haven't been as active a mum as some of my friends have been. I don't know who all my son's school friends and their parents are. Yeah, I don't... yeah. I sometimes feel a bit guilty.
I do feel a bit guilty.
I feel a bit guilty, and then I go and organise a party, and then I go, oh, that's where I work. Yeah, that's much easier, actually. But the point is, you can do a lot, and you can be true to yourself in terms of doing. And the point about today's debate is about choice. It's about people being able to make the choices, and it's about working with whoever else is in your life to make it all work. And it never works perfectly, but it works as well as it possibly can, and that's what it's all about in terms of juggling.
People often say to me, how do you cope being a mum now that you're a politician? I'm just like, cope as well as I did before. Really shit. Everybody is doing a crap job of being a parent, essentially.
Just step outside the London bubble again. Could we have another question from the WebEx, please?
The Voice.
The Voice. I realise with the age group in there, that some people might not know who the Misterons are, which I think is something you've
I
missed
know who
out
the
on so
Misterons
much.
are, yeah.
There are no further questions on that.
Oh!
Plenty in here.
Yes, please. Oh, microphone's coming to you. It's all right.
Hi, I'm Shireen. Yeah, I'm actually kind of on the similar note. I'm only 21, and I'm already really apprehensive about having children. I'm very career-minded, but in my very short time in the corporate sector, I've kind of experienced, obviously from males, how men look down on women going on actual maternity leave. I'm a law graduate, and I was doing a law internship at quite a prestigious firm in London, and I remember the HR director coming up to me, who was male, and said, you shouldn't really, I don't know if you're considering children, but just bear in mind that we think when women go on maternity leave, they lose their skills. They're not going to come back to the same role. And... Yeah, I got the bell out. Yeah, I nearly did. So I just wondered how.
I'll shine. Send it around. Be on Twitter, be viral by the end of the day.
Jess has parliamentary privilege, so she could do that. So try not to do it. Might be a client. Let's be careful.
I'll give them your email. I just wondered how kind of your experiences maybe differed in Parliament, or in your working life, and how we kind of hopefully can change that in the corporate sector, that attitude.
Who would like to start? Laurie.
Yeah, that is just so...
So depressing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of words which spring to mind, most of which are not appropriate for in here. It's so, to me, I've been talking about this for years. I mean, you've noticed I'm a little bit older than the others, but you know, for so many years, for all time, the women surge ahead of the men to start off with very often, you know, and then the babies come along, and then guess what happens? While they're off, they can lose their confidence. And yes, they do need to upskill, but it's all about how the organisation handles that. Because we're all rounded individuals, and unless we're treated as individuals with our own individual needs, and one of the things that we really pushed for was the entitlement to request flexible working, because it isn't just moms, it's carers, it's guys, it's people who perhaps would like to have an afternoon off and play golf. Well, is there something wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. What did you say?
If you're Donald Trump. Get on with
So,
your job.
yeah, so I mean, that whole culture, that flexible working culture, and if they don't appreciate you, well, you go off and you go somewhere where they will, because the talent that is being lost in this country at the moment, in the way, you know, by women who are going off and then losing their confidence and thinking, oh well, maybe I'll just do a part-time job, I'll just do X, Y, or Z. No, you mustn't think that way. And if companies do think that way, then shame on them.
I had my first baby when I was 22 years old. He's 13, nearly 14 now. I know I don't look old enough. So the truth of the matter is there's no right time to have a baby. I come from the generation where we were given those dolls that cried to stop us having babies as teenagers. I am that age where in school we were basically like given condoms every morning, just because, and teenage pregnancy did really drop, didn't it? So it obviously worked. I wasn't a teenager quite, but the truth of the matter is, I think that my generation were really told, and most of my friends definitely listen to this, get your career going. I actually think that it doesn't hold water, and that if you wanted to have your children young and then have your career after, that is totally acceptable as well, because taking the time out, actually, the gender pay gap, all the data shows that it is the taking the time out once you've started your career that causes the trouble. But we have got to change the fact that causes the trouble. But you shouldn't think that there is a right time to have a baby, and nobody should tell you that there is a right time or a wrong time to have a baby, because I did all right, and I had a baby at 22, and you're young, you've got a lot of time you've got a lot of time to make certain mistakes and then come back from it, is what I would say. But Laurelie's absolutely right. Companies need to be much, much better. But don't think that you can't have a baby. And I meet young people all the time now who say they can't have both, and that is just bollocks. That's just not true. And if it's not true for men, this is the benchmark. If it's not true for men, it's not true for you.
So be told.
We've got time for one more question, so I'll take it from the centre, because I've ignored you guys a little bit. So up there, microphone.
We can hear you.
Send it up. I don't want to throw the box, because I could just see it.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Gillian, and I'm in the Transition Centre, so I'm not doing anything at the moment. But I am an expert in usability and user experience, so I've had 8 years of learning about human behaviour. I'd like to share an anecdote to help Nicky with that person who said that she was bright. I went to see my doctor because I had period pains, and it was a locum, and he was an Australian man, and he suggested that I have a hysterectomy because I wasn't using my uterus. And I think he should have a lobotomy for the same reason. Yeah. So of course, I didn't think of saying that at the time, but I wanted to share that with you so when you have the same experiences, you can say it. I recently managed a team of about 20 people, and over 2 years we produced 5 children. Now, in BT, you don't get cover for maternity, so that meant those of us who carried on working were stretched. And it made me think about maternity cover. The team was 50-50 men and women, which in my part of BT, which is TSO, is very unusual. And it was an accident. I didn't plan it. It was just the skills we needed and the people who applied for the jobs. It turned out we had 50-50 mix. And it made me think, is this not about changing women's rights, but is it about levelling the playing field? And as a woman who doesn't have children and doesn't plan to have children, should we have a sort of paid gap for everybody? Because it takes the maternity question off the table. Should we all have the opportunity to take a gap from work and come back to work when we're ready? Now, the other thing I'd say is I spent some time working in a country where we had national service, so all men at 18 went to the army for 2 years, and I can tell you it didn't do anything for gender equality. They still came back. There weren't any more women working in the office, so it won't fix it completely, but in terms of doing things that might help, that's my idea.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you. Any follow-up to those, Nicky?
You're talking about, the guys having a couple of years off. It kind of, when you take time off to have a baby, that gives the guys the opportunity to kind of surge ahead. So maybe we should have our babies a little bit later on, so that we've already had the opportunity, and then we'll hold the guys back for 2 years. We'll go and let them go and do something else for 2 years. But seriously, it is so difficult. And when you said, it all happened by accident, I thought you were talking about the pregnancies. Yeah, I've got nothing else sensible to say, so I'll shut up now.
Sorry, Nicky, yes, please.
Well, first of all, thank you for the anecdote. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to definitely be using that, so you may well hear that repeated elsewhere. I think the idea of career breaks generally, more and more catching on, and I think actually it's the way that sensible employers keep people. So I know that in a lot of the law firms, for example, once you've been a partner for a period of time, 8 years, 10 years, then people do get time off. I think the point you have some career breaks. We're all going to be working for longer, so you can actually have career breaks throughout your career. The only thing I'd just say is that actually maternity leave isn't a career break. I felt like I'd been knocked around the head after having my son. I didn't suffer from postnatal depression like that, but it's a huge, huge shock system. When you said about being apprehensive, be apprehensive about having children generally, because they are bloody hard work.
Shittest job in the world.
But fun as well.
Yes.
They are. They get to an age.
Hilarious thing.
They get to an age they become quite interesting. My son now tells me off if I say anything that is vaguely sexist.
Yeah,
I've obviously
mine
said
too,
it so much, it's kind of rubbed off on him.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, Mum, you can't say
that. Yeah. So, but I think the idea, you're right. Things like flexible working, we see it all in the context of children, and then you see it in the context of women and juggling. Actually, flexible working, career breaks, parental leave, it's got to become for both sexes, regardless of the relationship that people are in or whatever what they want to do. I think that ability to take several months off at various points in your career, perhaps to study, perhaps just take time out, do something else, if you're very jaded after having worked incredibly hard for a number of years, all of those things help employee retention. And going back to the point here, it is depressing, really depressing to hear that, actually. It's outrageous. And I think it demonstrated what I said. It's not, I think Jess would have just said to that person, older and wiser, you're breaking the law. You've just broken the law. You're an HR director, you've just broken the law. It's unacceptable. But the point is that actually we are all, I would say, working longer. So the ability to keep people for longer, you're training people up costs a lot of money. Companies should want to keep us, keep you. So they should be wanting to do what's necessary for those flexible breaks to make sure that people want to stay.
So we've got one quick comment down the front, and then we're going to have to wrap, I'm afraid.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I actually wanted to say, and it was really, I was kind of incensed by what Shireen, you were just saying. Three reasons actually. One, I'm the General Counsel of Global Services, so as a lawyer, I'm incredibly, that's just not acceptable. So if you need someone to help you, I'm more than happy to have that conversation. Secondly, I'm not shy, so I am very willing to have that conversation. But thirdly, I am so proud to have just been appointed as BT's group sponsor for women. and anything that I can do that moves this agenda forward. Quite frankly, it's not just about women in leadership, it's about women, as you said, taking an equal part and having those folks around us, men, women, everybody around us, that actually does it because it's the right thing to do. And it is within our DNA. So all I can say is I'd like to help change the DNA. The other, just a quick anecdote is I'm also the first county commissioner for the Scout Association in Hertfordshire that is a woman. It's the first one in 207 years, and they are struggling with it, but boy, will they learn to live with it.
Well, unsurprisingly, you get 3 MPs or former MP and they talk and it runs over. I'm not surprised, but that's good. That's good. That's what we want. I can't express my gratitude and BT's gratitude and the network's gratitude enough for taking the time to come here. We know you're extremely busy. That was absolutely fantastic. I think everyone in here is very appreciative of that. There's an opportunity for me now to say very quickly some of the things you've talked about when I see it from a man's perspective, and I think most of the men, almost all the men in here probably agree, and most of them that I know would say that some of the things you talk about is absolutely unacceptable. We are not happy about it. The things that came out about the President's Club is not only disgraceful and appalling, it's frankly a bit weird. I mean, it's really weird. Like, who wants to hang out with 200 guys? It's weird. Am I wrong about that when I say that to the guys in the room? It's frankly, don't get it. Don't get it. It's very weird. So you have a whole host of people out here who are supportive of the things that we're talking about, the gender equality debate and the discussion, and we actively are involved. We're not just #MeToo. We are fundamentally in the room organising events and making sure that we are participating. So I'm really pleased to say that you have that support. On that note, we only have 2 guys on the committee of the Gender Equality Network, men. So, you know.
Come on, guys.
Hint.
Come on.
Right, I wanted to give a little bit of time so people, if there's an opportunity to speak with our guests afterwards. So we will wrap up there. Thank you for taking the time to attend. Make sure you tweet. Enjoy your day.